Hey y'all, today I want to talk about Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis, and one line that really stood out to me, and that's going to be this line right here where Matthew Murdock says, "Of course, you could be reporting about the explosive genocidal situation in the Middle East, but that might conflict with the financial interests of the company that owns your network." Now, this is obviously a reference to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, an invasion that occurred because the United States government claimed that Iraq was in possession of weapons of mass destruction, and that United States intervention was necessary to both disarm Iraq and free the Iraqi people. We now know that the Bush administration has conceded after the fact these claims of weapons of mass destruction are demonstrably false, and the United States' claims of freeing the Iraqi people were additionally false, as we now know that there's been somewhat between 280 to 315,000 Iraqi civilians killed by direct violence caused by the United States invasion of Iraq. So when talking about the genocidal situation in the Middle East, we now know what Matthew Murdock is referring to. But what about the financial interests of the companies that own the news networks? Well, first we need to understand how the media failed in covering the Iraq War. Prior to the invasion of Iraq, there was no pushback from mainstream media towards George Bush's claims of Iraq having possession of WMDs. The majority of media sources, regardless of partisan status, showed overwhelming support for George Bush's invasion of Iraq, consequently further emboldening public support. So why would the media do this? Well, the working theory that Matthew Murdock is referring to is the military-industrial complex, a word used to describe the unholy trinity of the Department of Defense, Congress, and military contractors, and the way they work together to promote their own interests at the expense of American society. In relation to the news, there are 6 corporations that control 90% of the information we're able to consume in the United States, and all of these corporations had vested interest in Iraq. For example, during the Iraq War, General Electric, a large-scale weapons manufacturer, held a majority share in NBC. So you can start to understand why it would be beneficial for GE to galvanize war efforts, because more war means more money spent on military contracting. The same argument can be applied to oil companies. There are vested interests in oil companies to advocate for a United States invasion of Iraq, because Iraq is a country that holds 8% of global oil reserves. And guess what? According to a Fairness and Accurate Reporting study, CNN and Time Warner had interlocking interests with Chevron, New York Times had interlocking interests with Texaco, Washington Post and Newsweek had interlocking interests with Ashland Oil, and the Wall Street Journal had interlocking interests with Shell Oil. So going back to Matthew Murdock's original point about there being financial reasons for the news media to avoid reporting on the genocide in the Middle East, his statements start to hold a lot more weight when thinking about the facts. And that's why I love this issue. This line is still very topical. The tools the media use to manufacture consent can be applied to almost any instance of US interventionism, whether you're talking about Vietnam, Afghanistan, and even what's going on today in the Middle East. But it also shows the righteousness of Matthew Murdock's character. It's incredibly bold for Bendis to make a claim like this in a comic in 2003, 2004, in the post-9/11 landscape where an overwhelming majority of American support was for the war. But it also shows why Matthew Murdock is such a cool character. He's a lawyer, not because he cares about the law, but because he cares about the humanitarian aspect of helping people. He always stands up for the little guy, whether he's Matthew Murdock or Daredevil. And once again, this issue goes to show the importance of media literacy, and why it's important to understand why the media frames things the way they do. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Hope y'all enjoyed. Thanks for watching.